The Peaceful Mother. Hello, and welcome to The Peaceful Mother, where I empower you to go from reactive parenting to proactive parenting. I am Emily. I am a parenting coach, a trauma recovery coach, and author of The Angry Mom's Guide to Self-Regulation. You may already know me from my Instagram or Facebook pages. Whether you are new here or not, I am so glad that you decided to click on this video. Before we get started, please remember to like, comment, and share this video so that we can get this information out there to as many parents and individuals in need as possible. Thank you. Let's get into this. I'm back finally with another video. You may have noticed that I have been MIA in the last few weeks, and I really intended on making a video the first couple weeks, and it was just like this big source of stress. And finally I was like, you know what, I have so much on my plate, and I need to practice what I preach, and I need to really check in with myself and really just kind of figure out what it is that I need. And what I came to was like, my heart just wasn't in it, and I had so many other things going on that I really needed to focus on that. And so I gave myself permission to not make a video for a few weeks, even if the algorithm doesn't like it, and even if some of you were waiting for some content. So typically when I go MIA on my social media pages, most of you are very understanding, if you notice at all. So I appreciate your understanding and your patience. And one of the things that kept me so busy the last few weeks is I was really busting my butt to put the finishing touches on my new course, the Inner Child Healing course. And I'm so excited about it because I've been working on this course for a long time, and I've been sharing information about the inner child and our other internal parts for quite some time on my social media pages. And the number one response that I get from people is, okay, but how? How do I connect? How do I heal? How do I do this work? And while I have shared some information in brief reels, which are like a minute and a half long, I just, I can't really give you guys the meat and the potatoes in a reel, and I can't even do it here in a YouTube video. So I created an entire course guiding you through step-by-step how to begin recognizing your parts, getting to know your parts, building trust with your different internal parts, really connecting with them, and then helping them heal and learning how to reparent, show up as the parent that you really want to be for yourself, so that you can then show up as the parent that you want to be for your children, your actual children, and just the people in your life. Just walk through life, as a healthier version of yourself. So that is what I was working on. It is released, it is available now. And so it has inspired me to get into today about, to teach all of you about the internal family members. Most of you have probably heard about your inner child, but few people have heard about the other parts, the inner teenager, the inner critical parent. What does it mean to be a loving parent? Like, what the heck? So I'm doing things a little bit differently today. I actually have like a presentation that I'm going to show you. And so let's just dive right in. Let's do it. All right, so the internal family concept. So first we have the wounded inner child, as most of you have heard of. So ultimately, the wounded inner child results from how our subconscious mind was programmed in response to not getting the nurturing that we needed. So it encompasses any emotions or parts of our personality that were suppressed in childhood. So let's say, for example, I am a really silly kid and I love making jokes. And if I am either punished for that or shamed for that, or, sense a lack of enthusiasm or kind of sense annoyance or something from my caregivers, then I, just kind of told outright, like, it's not okay. So that's something that's a part of me that I'm going to then suppress. And that's going to lead to some wounding. So then we have intergenerational trauma that we inherit on an environmental level. So that means that it's kind of the experiences that are passed down from generation to generation. An example would be like if my parents as children were always told to stop crying, whether it was an aggressive, like threatening, like stop crying right now, or you're going to be on timeout or something like that. Or maybe it's just like, oh, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't be sad. That's going to send a message. And so now they're parenting me, and they are likely just parenting in the way that they know how, the way that was modeled for them, the parenting that they received. Of course, some of us did have parents who were cycle breakers in their own right, and they were doing things differently, but our parents were working with limited resources and information. And so a lot of us in this generation of parents were told things like stop crying. And so that sent a message to us that crying is not safe, it's not acceptable, whatever it might be. And so we were taught to suppress our emotions, and also to avoid communicating our needs and our feelings, because for small children, crying is communication. Even a verbal child, even a 4-year-old child is going to cry to communicate in many cases, because they don't have the brain development that they need to really identify what's going on for them and put that into words and really verbalize that in a super productive, clear way. So that might not seem like it's going to be very wounding for us, but it certainly can be, because it's a part of us and it's our emotions that we're being taught to suppress. And if we're crying, we're in a stress state, we're stressed out. And so if we're in a stress state and we're not receiving the nurturing and the support that we need, the co-regulation that we need to process that situation, to process and release that stress, and we're being told, to stop doing the thing that innately is regulating ourselves, the crying, that is regulation for our nervous system, for our emotions. So if we're being told to stop all of that, and not receiving the support that we need through that stress, that's going to result in some wounding, and it impacts how our nervous system is developing as well. So that is going to then impact our wounded inner child when we grow up, when we're adults. So that's just one example of what an intergenerational trauma might look like on an environmental level. There is also the cellular stuff that's passed down. We know now that that trauma affects our cells, and those are passed down from generation to generation. We do know that. I mean, just think about the fact that, at least for us females, we were, as eggs, this is true for males as well, but we were being formed in our mother's ovaries when she was still in our grandmother's womb. And then same for our grandmother when she was in her mother's womb, and so on and so on and so on. And so, the children that we are carrying as women, carrying in our bodies and birthing, their eggs are being formed. So what we are experiencing is going to impact our grandchildren when we're pregnant with our children. And so what our grandmothers experienced impacts our development, because we were, as eggs, being developed in our mother's womb, in our grandmother's womb. So that is interesting to think about too. Obviously, we don't have a ton of control, but thankfully epigenetics, does tell us that we can change so much. We can change so much about how our genes express themselves based on our environment and our experiences and our mind and our intentions and the healing that we do. So those are all the kind of different ways that our wounded inner child is formed and impacted. So ultimately, when we are triggered, it's the wounded inner child that's being triggered. So I know triggered is kind of a buzzword lately, but let's get into really what that means. So triggers are anything that starts a chain reaction of emotions within us. So ultimately, it's an emotional flashback to times when we were previously hurt. And this is, so let's say, for example, this isn't actually, my mom wasn't actually a very, she wasn't a critical mom. She had her own issues, but she wasn't a critical mom. But let's just say, for example, that my mom was an overly critical mother. And that left me feeling like I couldn't do anything right. Nothing I did was good enough. And now as an adult, I get really defensive very easily because of this. So let's say, for example, that I'm, adult me, and I am making my daughter, my young daughter, she's, toddler, preschool age. I'm making her a lunch that I think she's actually going to eat. And, I make sure I put her favorite foods of the week or the month on there. And I put all this consideration and care. And I feed it to her, I serve it to her, and her reaction is a very typical young child response. And it's, ew, gross. I don't like that. And she pushes it away. Now I'm triggered. I'm angry. Like, how dare you? I'm so pissed. So ultimately, what's happening is that I'm having an emotional flashback that, her behavior, her response was the trigger that then sent me into feeling like I'm 6 years old again. And I I brought this art project home from school, and I was so excited to show my mom. I was so proud of it. And I showed my mom, and she got super critical. She just criticized it. Dogs aren't pink. Come on. You didn't color inside the lines. Look at all these spots where you colored outside the lines, whatever it was. She was so critical, and I was so hurt by that. Again, I can't do anything right. And so I just got sent back to that moment. So the key thing to really remember about triggers is that they have very little to do with the current situation and much more to do with our past experiences. Typically all we can really identify in the moment, unless we've really brought awareness to our triggers, is like, I'm super pissed. My daughter's so rude. She's such a brat. Oh my God. Like, these are the things that come up for us in our minds when we're triggered. I don't normally think that my child is a rude, brat, but when I'm emotionally triggered, those things are going to come up. And then if I'm not, aware, and if I'm not able to regulate myself, then I'm going to react in a very reactive way. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. So why, what I might do and why. So as I said, very little to do with the current event, much more to do with our past experiences. So to understand this, I like to use the iceberg analogy. So basically what I'm experiencing right now, the current emotional experience, my daughter, making me upset because she is refusing her lunch, that's about 10% of my current emotional experience. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the water is the rest of the iceberg. It's the other 90% of my emotional experience. It's the years of criticism that I got from my mom and how hurtful that was, all the emotions that brought up for me and continues to bring up for me. So another one of our parts, and this one is sometimes, maybe you heard of it, maybe you haven't. We have the misguided inner teenager. This is sometimes also referred to as our misguided adolescent. So this represents our once adolescent or teenager self. And when the wounded inner child gets triggered, if the healthy inner parent is not present to respond, the teenager will sometimes show up to try and protect the inner child. So they're very misguided though. They think they know a lot. I remember me as a teen and I thought I knew it all, but teenagers are very misguided. And so the inner misguided teenager attempts to protect the inner child, but ends up really doing this in destructive ways with destructive behaviors that ultimately hurt the inner child more. So some of these ways are she might lash out, he or she. Now I just want to pause and say, even though I'm going to say she a lot in here or her, and that's because I work typically with mothers, but everything I'm sharing here applies to all humans, whether you're a dad, you're a mom, you're not a parent at all, whatever, this applies to all humans. So the inner teenager lashes out. So this is, that kind of getting defensive really quickly. It's calling people names, it's yelling, things like that, the reactive behavior. And they get aggressive. So we're hitting, we're screaming, yelling, raging out, things like that. And also engages in dangerous situations because this gives them a false sense of power. So an example of this is, maybe let's say I'm staying in a toxic relationship and I understand that it's toxic, but I'm not really doing much better. I'm not ready to admit to myself or accept how toxic it is or how dangerous it is for me. Obviously, domestic violence situations go very, very deep. That's like a whole other video for another day. But that's kind of the inner teenager. Let's say also, maybe there was a time when I was in my early 20s and I was hanging out with people who were doing, I wasn't doing them myself, but I was hanging out with people who were doing like meth and hard drugs. That's not a safe environment for me. That was my inner teenager. She was putting she was allowing me, she was in the driver's seat of my life and allowing me to put myself in situations that I should have been protected from by my loving inner parent. And we'll get to her in a moment. So a lot of our false beliefs are rooted within our inner teenagers. So things like, I'm not good enough, or I'm nothing good ever happens to me, things like that. An example of that is last year I experienced a couple miscarriages. My inner teenager was very, very active at that time, and she kind of the things that kept coming up for me is, you're such an idiot for believing that anything good would ever happen to you. You're so ridiculous for getting your hopes up and getting excited about this. Don't ever get excited about these things. Like, nothing good's ever going to pan out. The reality is that I have a lot of wonderful things in my life, and I have a daughter already. So obviously things do really work out. I have a wonderful husband. But the teenager doesn't know that we're all grown up yet. Now she thinks that we're still a kid. We're still in the darkness. We're still in the wounding. And so she's trying to protect the inner child by saying, don't get your hopes up, or whatever your false beliefs are that are very prevalent for you. That's an attempt at protecting, but it's misguided. So then we have our inner critical parent. So the inner critical parent, is sometimes not present at all, just leaving the inner child to fend for themselves, and then leading the inner teenager to feel like they need to show up. And so when the inner teenager is present for us, there is this aspect of the inner critical parent being there too, because they're negligent. The inner critical parent is also emotionally unavailable, sometimes abusive, critical, and or inappropriate. So as I say here at the bottom bullet point, the voice of our mom guilt or our shame is very much rooted in our critical parent. It's the, you're not good enough, nobody loves you, nothing you do is ever going to be good enough, you're such an idiot, you're so stupid, you're so fat, like all these things that like we say to ourselves that hurt us, like a lot of that's primarily the critical inner parent. So she's verbally abusive to the inner child. She fails to uphold healthy boundaries. And the inner teenager, whereas the inner teenager lashes out to hurt others, that's the yelling at other people and things, the inner critical parent is lashing in to hurt us. And it feels very vindictive, but in their own right, it is their attempt at protecting us as well. It's just, again, misguided and very harmful. So then we have the loving parent. This is our ultimate goal. We want to be our own loving parent. And so the loving parent is the part of us who consistently accomplishes the primary roles of any healthy parent. And this is our role as a parent to our actual children. It was our parents' role for us, and it's our role as a healthy, loving parent for ourselves as well. And that is to protect, to nurture, and to guide our children. So this looks like, being able to regulate our emotions. Most of the time, none of us are perfect, but being consistent and able to regulate our emotions through our triggers, consistently responding to our child with patience and compassion and grace. So when our inner teenager shows up and does make some really poor choice, or our inner child makes a mistake, or is feeling very irrational, we're showing up for ourselves with grace and compassion and patience and nurturing and love. But then we're also upholding boundaries that are needed to keep the child safe and healthy. So we're protecting. No, you can't go to that dangerous situation, or you need to get out of this relationship. Or, you know what, I understand that you're angry, and that's okay. I'm going to sit with you and hear you out and give you the support that you need. But it's not okay to hit people, and it's not okay to scream at people. So I'm going to go ahead and take the lead here. I'm going to take the driver's seat, and I'm going to respond to this situation. Things like that. And the inner loving parent speaks to the inner child and the inner teenager with loving, affirmative words. And as I said, is willing to give grace and forgiveness when mistakes or poor choices are made. So it's not, you're such an idiot. God, you mess up everything. It's, you made a mistake. It's okay to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. What can we learn from this? And so all of this pretty much describes an emotionally mature adult. So the loving parent is emotionally mature, and they take responsibility for themselves when they aren't present. We can't always show up as our loving parent. Sometimes, we are imperfect beings. Sometimes these other parts are going to kind of take over before the loving parent steps in, and she's, he or she is able to take responsibility for himself, him or herself. So, that those are the internal parts. Those are the parts that we each have within us, regardless of how difficult or wonderful our childhood was, and maybe our caregivers were absolutely amazing, or maybe they were horrible, or maybe somewhere in between. But none of us have perfect lives. even the most wonderful parents are not perfect. They're not able to show up and give us the support that we need all of the time. And we also have other experiences. We have teachers, bullies at school, car accidents, all these different things that might happen to us in our lives. And sometimes our caregivers don't exactly know how to give us the support that we need, and that results in wounding for us. So these are the internal parts, and it's really, really handy to understand these different parts of ourselves so that we can start to get to know them, how they manifest for us personally, start to really build relationship with them. We're not trying to, reject or cast out our inner teenager or our inner critical parent. They're a part of us, and they mean well, even though they're not behaving very well. And so the best thing that we can do is become friends with them and really, build trust so that they can step aside, so that those parts of ourselves can step aside for the loving parent to step in and be like, you know what, I'm done yelling at my kids, or I'm done spanking, or, I want to respond differently when my partner gets critical of me or has an attitude, whatever the situation is. If we want to show up as our healthy selves, ourselves, throughout life, then this work really helps us get there. It can help us really overcome not just the false beliefs and the dysfunctional patterns of behavior, but it really, really helps us have a deeper understanding of ourselves and a deeper love for ourselves. And so through all of that, as we become our own loving parent, we can show up more as the loving parent that we want to be for our actual children. And that also impacts our other relationships as well. So it's really beautiful, deep, healing work. And it can also be very difficult at times. And so that's why I'm so excited to offer the course that I have created, guiding you all through the process. And so I'm going to put all the information where you can find that course, where you can enroll, where you can learn more, in the description of this video. And I just appreciate your time so much. I hope that you found value in this. I hope that you were able to learn some things, maybe some aha moments. And if you have any questions, please ask them in the comments or reach out to me. All of my information is on my website. So blessings.